My name's Gillian Rightford. I am the executive director of the ACA, and we obviously run the Effie Awards. I am not sure how many of you on the call have actually written Effie case studies before. So I'd be interested if you just pop into the chat, just if you could say first time or old hand, so that I can get a sense. All right, so as we go through it, obviously this deck will be available for you afterwards, and there's a lot more information in the deck that I'm going to present. So when I explain something to you, there's often kind of a more detailed slide there that gives you all the rules. So let's kick off. Obviously, the whole principle of the Effie Awards is to honor ideas that work. And what that means is that it's really about proving that the strategic thinking and the creative thinking and the channel planning and everything that you did together actually has resulted in impressive results. And the results could be anything, as we'll see as we go through. They don't have to just be sales, but essentially everything ties back together to the objectives. And it shows that ideas that work. So what I've done for today's session is I've taken some snippets from previous judges. And I've asked them, some were from the 23 judging and some were from last year's Grand Effie judging. And I've been a judge before as well, and I've also moderated the judging panels, and I have sat on the score review committee. So I've asked them, and I'll play you little snippets as we go through, just kind of what they think is important when they are looking at things as a judge. And I think it's very important that when you write the case, you begin with the judging in mind. And what I mean by that is that people are going to be reading your words. They're going to be reading for meaning, and I'll explain that in a little bit more detail. So think about who you're writing for and who you're writing to, and that will be the judges. So the way that it works is that we assemble a judging panel, and we've got our call for judges is out at the moment. So if you know anyone that wants to judge, or any of you want to judge, or you've got a client that wants to judge, please, I'll share the link with you later. We assemble about between 60 and 80 judges. So your work is seen by a lot of people, but each judge basically gets a collection of cases to go through. Not every judge goes through every single case. So scoring is done anonymously and confidentially. Judges are specifically matched with cases that don't provide a conflict of interest. So when judges apply, you've got to, whether you're an agency or a marketer, you've got to say, you know, what brands you worked on, what brands you've worked on in the past 3 years. And then we specifically do not match you into a category that is a conflict, which is a very important point when you are writing, because you are quite often writing for people who don't understand your category. So if you are entering something in the alcoholic beverages or whatever, and somebody is has been working on photocopier machines for their whole lives, they will not necessarily understand your terms, the category ecosystem, etc. So you have to try and give them the context when you're writing. Each level has minimum scores, and then at the end of the 2 rounds, you have a first round and a second round. At the end of the 2 rounds, it goes to a grand Effie judging. So in round 1, each judge reviews about 6 to 10 cases across a range of categories, and those are all done individually. The second round, and it's called the final round, but basically what that means is anything that goes into the second round is a finalist. So these are then finalists. They then reviewed again by different judges. And then each of those, you do the scoring, and then you get into a half day with the other judges, and you discuss the merits of each one. In both rounds, the written case is reviewed before the creative work. In terms of the way that the Effie entry is set out, it builds towards the creative work, and I'll show you that. And then during each judging round, judges provide written feedback. So on every level, where it's the insight, for example, you're asked to score it, and then you're actually asked to give written insight. the importance of that is that we then can issue, it's not, you don't have to have it, but it's very useful. We can issue an insight guide, and the insight guide comes afterwards, obviously. There is a small cost for it, but what it does is just shows you what these very, very good and experienced thinkers, why they've judged your whatever it is, however they've judged it. So think about when you're placing your entry in, think about asking for the insight guide up front, but afterwards you can also request it. So after that, I wait, hold on. Oh yeah. So in order to stand out amongst the 6 to 10 cases, obviously you need to write clearly, concisely, and cohesively. It's important to have a sort of a golden thread that runs through the beginning, which is your objectives and your context must obviously be answered by your results. Try and write it in a way that is, nice to read. It's interesting to read. And that there is really an important flow through the different sections. Anticipate the critical scrutiny of judges. So think about what kind of questions they would have. And really where this comes to light a lot is in the results section. There is also, during the different sections, there's a place to give your sources. If you are setting the context and you're giving market share information, or giving anything that needs to be referenced, please put those references in, because the person reading the case might not have any understanding of what they're reading, and they might need to go and look at those sources. So as I've said here, the judges are assigned purposefully cases that are unrelated to brands they work with or their competitors. So you need to provide that clear context about the industry, category nuances, industry jargon, if there's kind of, hectoliters or whatever, you need to actually explain to people what those things mean. So then what happens is at the end of the final judging, the golds are assigned, the silvers are assigned, the bronzes are assigned. So everything basically in the finalist gets something, unless it falls out for other reasons. But then the golds go through to the Grand Effie judging. And the Grand Effie doesn't have to be awarded. It's not a given that somebody is going to win it. It's a little bit like a Grand Prix. But the top cases, the golds go into a in-person judging with 8 to 10 top industry executives. And then if it's determined that it's deserving enough, a Grand Effie is awarded. And I'm not sure if you know, but last year we did award one, and it went to Pineapple and Halo. And at the end of this session, this presentation, I have summarized the Pineapple and Halo case study for you. I'm not sure we'll have time to get through it today, but it is there for you to read. So how do you enter? You go to this link, you go to the entry kit, you will see the full entry kit there, and it will then take you to the entry portal, and you will choose your, and it'll give you your entry forms for your performance marketing or your sustained success guidelines, and it'll take you through the whole program. The program is run on a system called Acclaim. It's reasonably easy to use, but if at any time you get stuck or you don't know what you're doing, you are very welcome to call us. I've got all the details at the end, and we will help you through the Acclaim process. So you have to submit your entries in the format that they've given online, but it's reasonably simple. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay.
Hi.
Yep.
Yes, sorry, Gillian. I do quickly. You
Yes.
mentioned case studies at the end that you're going to review. Is
Yeah.
that are you able to share those with us?
Yes, I've got.
Or is it just actual hard copies, just to sort of peruse, or not? Are you going to just do them online?
So what I've done with Pineapple is so often with these things, and it's actually, I'm glad you asked this, because it's a key issue that comes up. A lot of marketers don't actually necessarily feel comfortable sharing results. Yeah. Because it's obviously competitive and stuff. So what we have to do from a case study point of view is make sure that we can share the basics of the case, but without necessarily the real nitty-gritty that might delight their competitors if they got their hands on. So I will give you some references to cases that we can share, just to see that and we can share international cases as well. Just to show you kind of what a good case looks like. but I can't necessarily show you the actual case as was entered because it's going to have some stuff that's confidential. But I can give you enough. I can give you enough that you can get a view. Yeah.
Cool.
So thank you for asking that. Right. 5 principles for success. Understand the rules and make each section count. So that's very important. I'm going to explain why. Lay out your challenge, identify the incisive insight, the why, and the strategy and tactics, the how. Showcase how the idea was brought to life, and then demonstrate how the strategy and execution delivered results that solved the challenge. So very important to set up the challenge from the beginning. So, you know, the first point is really just know the rules. Use them So basically that was, you know, Colby charging, waiting to be charged down and sort of start kicking the ball before the guy got there. And he knew he was 100% within the rules. He also knew exactly what the other guy was capable of because they played on the same team in France. So the point is, understand the rules, read the rules and really be aware of them, and then figure out how to leverage the rules to make the most of each section. So the sections are these. Number 1, challenge, context, and objectives. That counts for 23.3%. There are questions that they will ask you to answer. I'm going to explain a few of them now. Section 2 is insights and strategy. Again, 23.3. Section 3 is bringing the strategy and idea to life. This is quite a meaty section because it's your full creative reel, it's your creative executions, but it's also your media plan, your spend, your everything else. And then section 4, what actually happened. And you can see that that's upweighted slightly. So the results are really important. But again, you know, the results could be something other than sales. It doesn't have to be, you know, it could be an increase in conversation about a particular subject, for example. So let's just listen to this grand Effie judge. This is Makosha from MNC Saatchi Abel.
In terms of what it takes to win the Grand Effie, I think for me, the kind of word of the day was around breakthrough. So, you know, breaking all the rules from a marketing, from an advertising perspective, but also delivering a breakthrough creative campaign, accompanied with breakthrough results. So, yeah, I think all around the winner kind of ticked all of those boxes, and the winners can be really proud of what they've achieved.
So, I mean, she makes it sound easy, but obviously it's not. But the point is that there has to be, and I mean that's something that you'll hear a lot of people saying, there actually has to be excellence in each one of the pillars in a way, and not just in one. So when you're going to enter, you're also going to choose your categories that you enter in, and you can enter into more than one category. And it is important to choose your categories well. So there are industry categories, and then there are speciality categories. There are things like David versus Goliath, there are all sorts, but the portal will help you identify those. And this is a very important piece of advice here.
The biggest piece of advice I can give anyone who's developing a case study or entering an award is to build to purpose. Focus on exploring each category's unique criteria and edit your entry accordingly. I do believe as judges, far too often we see the same campaign entered into a multitude of categories, with the criteria of each category differing, but the entry itself remaining unchanged. So take that time to understand what each category's focus is, and adjust your entry so that it speaks to those unique criteria. You may be pleasantly surprised at how much it can make your case study stand out amongst the rest.
So it's a very important piece of advice from Astrid, because when you are judging and you reading more than one case, those of you who have judged in the past, your eyes sort of start kind of zoning out. And when it's just a simple cut and paste from one category form to another category form to another category form, you actually kind of go, oh, come on. So if you are writing the same case, but you are entering it into different categories, answer the questions specific to that category, and you'll have a far better chance of
the biggest piece of
actually getting sort of traction with your judges. So that's principle 1, know the rules. Principle 2, demonstrate the difficulty of the challenge into clear, measurable objectives. So in section 1, which is your challenge context and objectives, it's the foundation, and weight is given to the degree of difficulty of the challenge. So again, if you are doing something, I mean, we saw it in some of the cases last year, I think some of the beer brands, for them to achieve a 1% growth rate sounds absolutely kind of, unimpressive until you understand the context of the industry. So really give the context and explain to the judges what made this particular brief or challenge really difficult, because the harder the challenge, the more weight is given to it. So this is the glue of the whole thing. Judges evaluate whether they have the necessary context about your industry, category, competitors, and brand to understand your entry and the degree of challenge. The case is assessed for both suitability and ambition within the framework of the challenge. So people kind of go, well, there's the framework of the challenge. Oh, it wasn't really that difficult, was it? Or, my goodness, this was really hard. So what the judges are looking for: context that frames the situation. What does success look like? Category, marketing challenges and goals, competitor landscape, brand history and market trends, clear objectives and KPIs, and how these objectives are significant to the brand, business, or cause. Very importantly about this little clause here, KPIs not retrofitted to the results. We see some very funny things where it'll be the objective was to create a 7.32 increase in market share awareness, and then that's exactly what that obviously wasn't the objective. No one sets out to whatever. So what was the objective, and then what was your thing? And don't retrofit it. But yeah, it's an interesting one, and these sound like a lot of questions, and it sounds like you're writing a thesis. The format itself is very brief. It's very concise. So the shorter and sharper you can make these sections, the better. So the best cases clearly define the objectives, awareness, what lift were you looking for, measurable goals are important to frame your results later. Let's just listen to Naomi here from Ogilvy.
Setting the context is the most exciting and most important part of your Effie, I think. And I think in my learning from judging is the entries that actually set up the context very well and took it from context to objectives really did well. And what is important is that the objectives match the results. So that is very important. I think people always assume that judges are fair with all the categories, conventions and limitations. If you do your entry, you want to make sure that you outline that very well upfront, because you're not going to be in the room.
And that's a good point. There's no one answering questions.
What stood out for me as a judge at the Effie Awards is that a lot of people tend to be so excited about the results, the insights, strategy, bringing the idea to life, and they forget the most important thing for us or rather myself as a judge, is for you to paint a clear picture of what the objective and what the context is, because that will give me an idea of what to look for when reading your case, because the clarity of it makes it much easier for me to pick out and see whether your strategy or either your creative and your results link back to your objectives. Because you can have the greatest results, you can have the best creative and bringing the strategy to life, but if that does not meet the business objectives of what you're set to do in the first place, then unfortunately the case study does not connect.
Setting the context is
so one other thing that is coming up for you in the next week or so is an Ipsos review. So Ipsos is a global partner of Effie's, and what they do is they are doing for us at the moment in South Africa. They're looking at all of our winners last year, and they're pulling the key insights out of those and like what made those cases win, and that will be shared with you. But this was just an example from 2023. So here was one case study considering how economic challenges impact daily grocery shopping and how a brand rebuilt value perceptions. So this is just an example that you can read of how they set the context for this. Was a Woolworths case. What was actually going on? What was the situation, and what were they trying to achieve? So look out for it. We will send you the email invitation Thursday, the 27th of March. Ipsos is going to be presenting a webinar on the trends and insights that they have pulled out of last year's results. So that will help you a lot as well. So section 2, pull out the most is about insights and strategy. And the third principle is pull out the incisive insight and the strategic tactic deployed to solve the problem. So what do we mean by that? This section asks you to explain the strategic thinking that enabled you to pivot from your challenge to your results. Again, it counts for 23.3%. What are we looking for here? How inventive was the strategy and idea? What was your strategic process? And what was your unique insight? Now, all of us on this call know that insights are those scary things that sometimes are not insights, they're just facts. So what real understanding or truth did you know about your consumer or category, or how your consumers reacted to the category? And what research did you use to back that up? Why was the brand positioned to address the insight? How does the insight link to the strategy? This section asks for your strategic idea. And then in the next section, you'll show how you've actually brought that to life. So some of the kind of advice, insights should feel new and different with attention. Why am I echoing now? Tension and a sense of accountability. The idea needs to take the insight and act on it in an interesting, compelling, and useful way. The idea should be crisply articulated and linked to an insight. Find a real insight, not an audience observation or category convention. So the next section, which as I said is the juicy one, is bringing the strategy and idea to life. And you need to show how that it was done in a compelling way. Again, 23.3%. And what this section looks at is your creative work and your investment and how you spent it. So judges are looking for a summary of the key elements of your plan, including your creative work and channel strategy. Help them understand how your plan related back to the strategy and audience and how the core components worked together. The section will be scored around your investment overview, and there's stuff on the portal that helps you figure out how to showcase that. And you also then need to show us your creative reel and the sort of core campaign images. So what are the judges looking for? How did you execute your strategy? What is there a direct line between objectives and how you actually brought this to life? Why did you choose those different media channels? Is there a consumer path you can share? What sort of was your split in media spend? And there is a media budget elaboration field that can help you there. So specifically what they're looking for is, how did you bring it to life? Why was it interesting? And why did you choose those specific media channels? So just something in terms of the actual entry, we ask for a creative reel. What's really important about this creative reel, and there is more detail in the deck on this behind, it's a hidden slide, but there is more detail. What we're wanting from the creative reel, sometimes you see those case study videos that kind of, Cannes winners show, where it's kind of what the context was, then we did this, then we got so much publicity, etc. What's important in this creative reel is we need to see the executions. So we must see at least one complete element per touch point. So if you've got something, a gondola end, or you've got a billboard, or you've got a whatever, try and make sure that in your creative reel, and there are examples that I'll point you to for creative reels. I've put a link in here to our e-zine that we published after the awards last year, and every single finalist has a creative reel that you can click through and watch. So just make sure that you've got, it's an audio-visual kind of a full representation of your campaign. So it's 3 minutes long, but it's not just a kind of a glossy overview. We actually need to see the executions. And then we need a 3-minute reel and we need a 30-second reel. Why? Because if you go through to a finalist and you're going to win an award, we're going to need a 30-second reel to play on the night. So it's an investment in your greatness, the 30-second reel. Bringing strategy and creative to life. So it's very important that everything you show in your video actually aligns with everything else you've said. Try and do the video in an interesting way that's maybe kind of in the brand tone of voice. So it's not just kind of a, here's what we did, but kind of make it fun. And it should really showcase all the work. Carl Willoughby, who's Chief Creative Officer for TBWA, but also for the Creative Circle, has a very important point in this area.
A lot of the work that I saw last year was really well put together in terms of strategy. I think for me, Effie's felt like a lot of the entries or entrants had set up good strategic arguments. I think my criticism last year was that at the end of the day, innovation should still be quite an important aspect of what we do. And when I say innovation, I mean distinction, showing up differently. You could call it creative depending on what you're putting on the table, but for me it's about how do you also bring the idea to life. So I think a winning entry or case study or case should have all the basic things, the context or the challenge, the insight, strategy, the idea especially, and then impact. I think for me impact is massive, and we're seeing impact playing a more pivotal role in many of the awards now. Even if you consider Cannes, our impact or results are, in some categories, the reach categories make up 30% of the scoring. So, while I think, insight's important, strategy and idea and how you bring that idea to life, for me personally as a creative, is quite important. I think last year I saw a lot of work which was, well put together, good setup, good strategy, but then the idea let it down. So I'd see amazing cases, but then when I looked at the work, it was a banner or something that got results, but the work wasn't specifically innovative or distinctive or creative. And I think for me, it just means that the work that we put together needs to still appeal. The idea still needs to be strong and still needs to play an important part. And again, yes, I'm saying that as a creative, but I think the idea should still play an important role at Effie's. I know the results are important, but I don't think we want to be in a space where we're just awarding work just because of results. I think the work has to be good. It has to raise the bar in some way or another.
So what Carl is saying there just goes back to the point of really make sure that you win in every single one of those pillars. So as he's saying, you can have the absolutely best, world's best objective and the world's best insight and the world's best results, but if you don't win also in the creative execution pillar, then you're unlikely to get more than a finalist. So it's important that the work is also very very strong. This is what Sabu Siptole said from the Odd Number. He was a Grand Effie judge.
Part of what made the ones stand up was just the bravery in how they used media, as well as how they used the idea, and also just amazing results. Ultimately, this is a strategic award with strong creative that yields the best results. So I think what you'll see is a campaign we all love and know, kind of stand head and shoulders above the rest, just purely because of its bravery. Everyone's talking about it, and amazing results.
So he's talking about Pineapple there. Couldn't say the name yet, obviously, because it hadn't been announced. But what Ipsos did also find, and this is interesting, was that most of the gold winners from the previous year were ones where they challenged category conventions in either the work or the tonality or the media. And the breaking category ad conventions basically showed, you can see here, far more of the winners had actually had non-conforming worked category norms. So that's quite interesting. Another little comment from Tabang Squambane, also grad Effie judge.
The arguments and the debate and the thinking was critical. It was incisive. It led to a lot of curiosity and debate around what was the best work. And really, we got to judge the four cases that were selected for gold, and what phenomenal cases they were. But at the end of the day, one had to win out. And I feel like after that rigorous level of debate, the quality of the work that stood out really was breakthrough. It was market defining, if not actually turned over the norms of what we view on marketing, requirements for marketing, mechanics that should be used on a constant basis.
Okay, so then principle, section 4 is all about the results. What you're trying to do here is you're trying to narrate the effectiveness and making sure that your campaign results show how you have resolved the objectives that you set up front. You've got to tie the story together. This counts for more than anything else, 30%. Judges are looking for direct correlations, and this is the hardest part, because this is where the rubber meets the road and where judges start saying, hang on, didn't they say, and then they go scrambling back to the first part, and if there's a kind of a crossed wire there somewhere, then you're scuppered. So direct correlations between objectives and results, again, the context, again, referencing the difficulty of the challenge. And when I say the context there, maybe it's a category thing that was really hard to get, and that's why the results were actually so significant, even though on paper they don't look that good. So how did the results impact brand and the business? How did the marketing lead to the results? Brand data, industry benchmarks, whatever. Were there any other contributing factors that were hard to overcome? And very importantly, where key metrics are withheld without explanation, judges assume it's because results were weak. So when I said upfront, sometimes the clients are very reluctant to provide things. We do have a form when you enter that we we commit to non-disclosure, to non-sharing with competitors, with all of those kind of things. And if you need us to help you and send your client or your whoever is reluctant to share, we're very happy to help you try and release that. There are sections, if you just go not applicable, client won't share, it does unfortunately weaken your case. If that is the case, though, think about how else you can explain to us why those results were significant in those areas. So consistency is essential. Charts and graphs are useful. Make sure they tell a clear story. Tie together the story of why the work drove the results seamlessly, and try and prove as evident proof that it worked. So here again is Nao. Let's listen to her.
I think when it comes to results, it's very important that the results mimic the objectives, but also resolve the context problem that you set up front. I think that combination is so important. The result should tell the story, the functional story, and almost fulfill that functional story you talked about in your strategy. If your challenge and the context was X and your insight and strategy was Y, the results therefore is the Y that shows why the strategy was so on point. And I think that sometimes you can miss doing that and miss doing that well.
Okay, so top entry tips. Start with the executive summary before writing individual sections. So if you can tell your executive summary as a kind of you can write it out in a paragraph, for example, you'll be able to drill down. It must all tie together. And if you write that executive summary, some people like to actually write the executive summary last, which is also fine, but just make sure that whatever it is it's all tied together. Provide context. We've explained that. Cases are read as one of many. Try and write it impactfully, focused, in a nice way, in an entertaining way. Cases built on honesty, authenticity and simplicity versus marketing jargon are the strongest ones. A data point is not an insight. Tie insights back to human behavior. Create a strong link between execution and results. Use the creative reel to complement the information, not simply reiterate what's in the entry. Define results in terms of objectives very clearly. Make it compelling, be concise. Try and engage the judges. review and proofread constantly. So get someone else to spell check it. Sort your maths out. I mean, we had a case in the Grand Effie where we were sort of like, wait a minute, they actually said this other thing over there, and now they're saying this thing over here. And at that stage, it's too late to say, well, is that a typo? Is it not a typo? So just make sure that all your bits tie together. I'm going to play this one last video from Tebogo.
I was really excited about the level of passion that each of the jury members really showcased in terms of evaluating the work that we saw in front, and actually had to assess. As a marketer who is always faced with the challenge of evidencing return on investment, to sit here with leading industry experts from the creative and the marketing field, and all of them really robustly engaging on the merits of the creative impact and also the commercial impact was heartwarming. And it really gave me a sense of comfort that the advertising and marketing industry in South Africa is in good hands. And I think at the end, the final winner that we've put forward can really stand head and shoulders with a global best, because their work was truly phenomenal. It was cut through from a creative perspective. And also in an industry that is just very filled with a lot of noise. They actually managed to stand out and actually deliver some tangible results for the brand and for the business.
Okay, so eligibility, you'll find all of this on the website. There's a sustained success category, which is for 3 years, ending in March this year. All other categories are basically had to run from February last year to January this year. Our deadlines, again, all of the stuff is available on the website. Our early bird entries open on the 3rd of April, and then the last minute deadlines are in May, so there's a little bit of time. From an admin point of view, we will only be accepting EFTs this year for payment because the credit card thingy is a complete nightmare. And it's much more simpler. And what we did find is that the two things that happened was that people start an entry and then they don't complete it, or they start an entry, they complete it, and they forget to pay. So there is a thing this year where if you do need to pay before we can actually put you forward to judging. But also, if you get stuck for whatever reason, do reach out and we'll see if we can help you complete those entries, because I feel quite sad seeing them. So much work has been done, and then for some reason they just sit in the incomplete section. So remember that we're here to help. If you need any advice, whatever you need help, kind of for whatever reason, whatever's stopping you that completion, let us help you. So this is the these various timelines. We are still recruiting for judges. So as I said, if anyone wants to nominate someone or suggest, there is you can apply to be a judge on the website. I've added a few little resources. This is a reel. I'm not going to play it now, but we ran an Effie dialogue where we had Carl on from a creative point of view. We had the global head of creative research from Ipsos on the dialogue. We had one of our jury co-chairs, Rafilwe from Discovery, on the panel. And then we also had Nicole Shub, who's the CMO from the winning Grand Effie, and it was a fantastic discussion. So I've put the link to that reel here, and there was a lot of insights into what makes a winning case, what made Pineapple's case so strong. So watch that. It's not very long. If you want the full panel discussion, I've put the link to it there as well. It's about an hour. It's quite interesting. I've also given you the link here to our e-zine, and it's got all the creative reels for all the finalists in there. So go and have a look at those. We are going to be launching the Effie Academy, which is a fundamentals program, and it runs around those 4 pillars. So I would sort of suggest we're going to launch it in the next week or so. If you've got time, it might be fun to run through those things, because when they talk about objectives, for example, they explain to you exactly how to write it and how to write a really good one. So spoken about all of this. We've got, how much time have we got left? I want to do questions, but I'm just going to take you through the executive summary here for Pineapple, and all the rest of the work is in this deck. So
Pineapple is a digital millennial-first insurance company with the ambition to disrupt the staid, traditional category of insurance through a brand of honesty, transparency, and authenticity. Pineapple launched in 2017, and for 5 years they had managed to achieve incremental growth with an over-reliance of digital, social, and performance media channels. Awareness was still low, and so we were approached to help drive fame, equity, and growth for the brand. First, we refined their positioning to align to Pineapple's value proposition, the fairest insurance in the land. Next, we developed a unique and distinct voice for their audience and the category, a category traditionally shrouded in dishonesty, false promises, and jargon. Third, we created a fame-building campaign for Pineapple that introduced a unique voice to the world and defied the conventions of the category by doing what not many had done before, being honest. Honest about ourselves, honest about advertising, and most importantly, honest about insurance. We then set ourselves another audacious goal. No two billboards could be alike, and so we created 108 unique pieces of out-of-home creative, 108 headlines, 108 instances of the most honest insurance campaign ever seen. And that's how we turned a startup, challenger insurance brand into a household name, using traditional media to build a modern digital brand and connect with an audience who resonated with the same thing we did, the truth.
So that was their creative reel, and you can see it really does showcase all of the executions. So what was their executive summary? The challenge: how does an insurance challenger brand drive fame and growth in a competitive category people don't necessarily trust nor like? It sets it out beautifully. The insight: people don't like insurance at all. Reflecting this in how we speak about insurance would establish an emotional rapport. The executive summary: the idea: use challenger brand theory to disrupt the category, use humor as an emotive hook, entertain for commercial gain. How did they bring it to life? Stand out against established players, switch and save messages with honest communication about ourselves, about advertising, and about insurance. The results: they increased annual policy sales by 232% with a monthly peak 640% year on year. And increased market share by 150%. I mean, that is quite staggering. So I'm not going to go through this in great detail, but you'll get the deck. I've just summarized how they wrote each particular section. So you'll see that how they set out the context. Why is this case worthy? You've got to explain that in your entry. So, you know, they disrupted insurance by being truthful in a way established players hadn't been. What were their objectives? Who was their audience? And then really, they wrote this in a really great way in terms of the consumers' behavior in the category. Going into section 2, the insight. The insight was: hard to build an emotional connection because people don't like insurance. Very powerful. What was the strategic idea? They used different aspects of it, and they explain how they do that. How did they bring it to life? They decided to go only out of home, which is quite bold. But they explain why they did that. They showed examples of it, and then how they then optimized that in different social media campaigns. How did they then bring that all to life? What was the tonality? They explain all of this stuff. What was their channel plan thinking? Why did they choose out of home? Then some examples. And then section 4, the results. I've redacted some of this because obviously they don't want everybody to see, but obviously they were significant. And they disrupted insurance to increase their policy sales by an enormous amount. So yeah, that's where we are, and that's will be shared with you. And I just want to say good luck. We will send you the invitation to the Ipsos workshop, and then as I say, we're here. I've put our email addresses here. We're here for questions, and we're here to help. So any questions, comments, anything? You can just shout them out if you want, or I'm going to stop sharing, then I can actually see you. Or type them in the what you call it.
Hi, Gillian.
Yes, hi.
Hi, sorry, I'm so used to Teams. I've been trying to find the unmute button.
I know, we'll get it right one day.
We'll get it right. Thanks. This was quite interesting. I've got a bit of a specific question, and I think it's something that's been in some of the work that we do. It's been kind of wrecking our brains, right? When we think around impact, one, for the business, and two, for the audience, how would we frame it for campaigns that are not necessarily looking for commercial impact? So more maybe brand growth or affinity, or even social impact. So I'm thinking specifically around a financial literacy campaign, which is a regulated space, right? It's mandated, but we feel the way we offer it is powerful. But when we have to think about crafting results for something like that for awards, which necessarily doesn't equate to sales, but more of a social responsibility, social upliftment type of thing. I don't know if anyone in the panel has any thoughts on that.
So there is a specific category for that, and I forget what it's called, but it's something like social transformation or something or other. So go and look for that particular category, and I can using Women's Day, and again, that's another category. There's a category for using kind of special days differently. And they looked at how people usually use Women's Day and how it's all a little bit pink and patronizing. And they said, what is an issue? Thanks, Ash, the social good category. So they looked at what, the real issues for women, and in the category about drinking and gender-based violence, etc., etc. And they went and they created these women-only shebeens and pubs and taverns. But more than that, which could have been a bit gimmicky, more than that, what they started developing is a kind of a rating scale for women to see which bars and pubs and things were safer for women than others. And it was horrible that we have to live like that, but it's a fact of the world. And so they were using it as social good. Now that's so hard to prove, but in the way that you lay it out, and I think it's very important that you lay out the challenge, and then in your results, they may not need to lead, but how else can you prove that your challenge has been addressed? So I think it's a great example. And maybe even if it's just you can do some research in amongst the target audience to ask specific questions about how the campaign has helped them. It doesn't have to be sales, and it doesn't have to be leads. It can be transformative behavior, but you will have to try and prove that in some way. But it sounds like you should. Yeah.
Thanks. That helps.
Okay, good. Any other questions?
Hi, Gillian. I have one.
Nicole.
Hi, relating to the two types of categories that you've got. So you've got sort of one that's sort of a singular entry with the validity period of sort of February 2024 to, present. And then you've got something called the sustained category. So I'm interested to understand the difference between the two, because let's say a campaign, I've got one that I'd like to put forward. The year before last was sort of done as a pilot project, if you will, or the last 2 years was sort of a pilot project to which client then responded, we love the results. We'd love to go more full scale on it. Would that sort of kind of campaign then fit into a sustained campaign or a, singular campaign? What would you suggest there?
It's a very tricky question, Nicole. And the reason I say it's a tricky question is that the campaign is fundamentally, I imagine they're putting more investment in it if it's not
Correct.
a
So
pilot.
more investment, greater route list, greater sort of activation spaces, that kind of thing. At its core, the same idea, just sort of the second phase of it had lots more add-ons kind of a thing.
Yeah. I may need to get back to you on that one. I would say, Ash, I don't know if you have any specific thoughts on that one, because I think it's not really apples and apples. It's sort of apples and apples with toffee.
Oranges and nachos, yeah.
So, and then your growth in the second section might be dramatically greater, but things have actually changed. So
correct. So should we then do a sort of sort of pronged approach where we do results for year one, results for year two, because you're not comparing the same kind of thing. Because then to your point, sort of give you an example, 9 events activated in the second year, when that wasn't the initial brief as to how we really got there in the very beginning 2.5 years ago. It's sort of going, well, now you're not answering the question, and we want to stay clear of that.
But I'll look into it, because part of the story might be in the success of the pilot, and then it is proven. I mean, this is all about proving effectiveness. So it could be that your second year actually almost proves so it's a great question, and we'll figure it out and we'll come back to you. Ash, have you got any more to add to that? No. Okay, cool. Thanks, Nicole. Anybody else?
So our campaign launched in the December period of 2024, but obviously validation this begins on 1st of Feb, but it ran from December into April and then continued at various different executions throughout the year. So what happens in that scenario? How do we enter that?
I think that's fine. I mean, I
think
it's fine. It's run within the period, yeah.
Okay, cool. It's just that we perhaps put the previous data as contextual for the period.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
I'm just getting a little message here from Ash. Hold on. So Ash has nothing more to add to sustain the state. Some additional. Oh, Bogosi's answering your question a little bit here, Sivu. So some additional thoughts. More of the results in the social impact space tend to be qualitative. Feedback from recipients, change in behavior as opposed to quantitative. But as I always say, in the social impact space, impact can be measured by the significant change achieved in one individual life that is 1 million times greater than impacting 1 million people. So yeah, that might help you, Sivu. Any other questions? So in terms for reaching out for help or assistance, if you've got any other questions as you sort of embark on things, our team is Dineo, who's new to our team, is going to be helping with a lot of the queries and things around a claim, and any questions you've got, you can feed through to her. She will then kind of feed it through to the rest of the group, whether it's Snare or Ash, who's our sort of technical boffin on all the rules. And we will, as a collective, make sure that we answer all of your questions. So just give us a shout. But we'll see. Yes, I will definitely share the deck. You'll get an email with a link. And we'll probably put it on YouTube as well. And as I say, yeah, and there's a lot more detail in the actual deck. So there's the pineapple case study, and I think what I might actually do because there are lots of first timers on this call, I think what I might do is I might actually just add in the checkers 6061 from the year before, so that you've got 2 to look at. And then I'll also just see if there are any kind of written cases that we are free to share, and if I can do that, then I'll pop those into the email as well. Okay, thanks everybody. I'm sure we'll see you through the process, and yeah, we're here if you need us.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Bye.
Everybody.
Bye.